And a very good afternoon to everyone who's joined us for the final in this series of the Trinity Talks, the live lecture series that we've brought to you over the last 7 weeks. And boy, what a fantastic ride it's been. 7 lectures, everything from the sciences to the social sciences, humanities. And tonight we've got a fantastic lecture lined up for you in media and communication. 3 of our leading lecturers are going to present to you this afternoon, and particularly talking about Asian cinema, which many of you will have some interest in, I imagine. And particularly they're going to have a look at how Asian cinema has actually influenced Hollywood. I'll introduce our lecturers to you very shortly. Being the last lecture, sadly, it brings us to a close of what has been a fantastic series of lectures. Those of you who have joined us for the last 6 lectures and are joining us tonight, over the next month, we're going to be preparing your certificates of participation. Okay, and we will send these out to you with your name on it. That will be a fantastic addition to your resumes, a certificate of participation in this fantastic live lecture series that we are calling the Trinity Talks. So tonight, media and communication. Okay, media and communication, a very popular subject at Trinity College, and can lead to all kinds of areas of study and also in careers. Let me just quickly show you the profile of a student who came to Trinity College some time ago now, and her name is Ngop. Ngop is from Vietnam. She came to Trinity College and she studied the Foundation Studies program. She studied very hard. And she then went into Melbourne University. She got her guaranteed place in the Bachelor of Arts degree. Ngop, she's majored in media and communication and psychology. Okay. When she went back to Vietnam a number of years later, she got a job as the assistant producer of The Voice and The Voice Kids. So for all of our Vietnamese students joining us today, some of these popular programs that you've watched, this is the graduate of Trinity College and Melbourne University who was responsible for putting together those very popular programs, The Voice and The Voice Kids. She's currently working on a brand new reality television program that's going to be broadcast very soon. So a really successful career, and having studied media and communications. This is the art school where, if you are interested in studying media and communications, you're going to be studying in these fantastic buildings here. It's an amazing place, group study areas where you can hang out and chat. This is one of the lecture theatres. This is a view of the art school from above. They have their own visual exhibits and classrooms. And even this is one of the lecture theatres that you may be sitting in. Can you imagine yourself sitting in here listening to a lecture? It's a really exciting place to study, and it almost looks like a nightclub. Fantastic facilities in the Bachelor of Arts at the University of Melbourne. Okay, so that's a little bit about Melbourne University. Of course, we already know that Melbourne University continues to be the #1 ranked university in Australia, currently ranked 33 in the world. A fantastic place to study. And Trinity College, the Foundation Studies program, prepares you for entry into Melbourne University with all the skills that you'll need to do well. In fact, a large number of the scholarships that Melbourne University offer are actually awarded to Trinity College students. Okay, we have programs coming up commencing in January and February, and also again in June, July and August next year. Okay, I'm going to invite for the last time to say hello. James, are you there from our admissions and marketing team? Here he is, excited for another week. James,
hello everyone.
What can you tell our students here who have joined us?
Well, I had a sneak peek of the material that you're about to see this evening. It's very, very interesting. If you keep me busy in the background, I'll miss most of it, answering questions. However, you can focus on it and enjoy the material that's coming up. Just a reminder for anyone who hasn't been to one of these sessions before, in the chat box, the chat field there, please put any remarks or comments where you are responding to the lecturers in real time, you're answering their questions, you're making comments on the content of the material you're seeing. And in the Q&A box on the other side of your screen, put in any general questions. I'll answer those in the background. Your academic staff won't be monitoring that. They can't see it. So if you're communicating with the academic staff tonight, or this afternoon rather, put that in the chat box. Otherwise, communicate with me in the Q&A section, and I'm sure we're in for a great afternoon, evening.
And James, while I've got you here, things in Melbourne at the moment really looking good at the moment.
Very positive. We're all out of lockdown here and in New South Wales, which were the two major states for that. The rest of the country's open. It's time to get back to normal business. We'll be back on campus in no time at all. Looking forward to it, Ben. Can't wait to be in the office again. And to, of course, welcome the students back on campus.
Of course. And cafes, restaurants, public events, music events.
Everything's open.
They're all back. They're all happening. And 2022 is looking like a fantastic year, rebounding, reopening, and also welcoming students back onto the campus. So if you are thinking of studying in Australia or anywhere for that matter, Melbourne and Melbourne University makes a fantastic option. The #1 university in Australia. We hope to see you here next year. Very quickly, tonight, you know the rules. Respectful chat and comments into the chat box. If you would like to engage in the discussion, please do, but keep it respectful, keep it in English, okay? And I am going to tonight, because I know you guys now, I'm familiar with many of your names, I'm going to open up the chat so that everyone can see, okay? Keep the chat focused on the lecture, please. Okay, no need to say hello, no need to say hello teacher or anything like this. Keep your chat focused on the lecture, okay, and keep those comments constructive if you can. With that in mind, I'm going to talk to you at the end of tonight, along with James, answering some questions, opening up your microphones if you want to talk directly to our lecturers. But for now, I'm going to hand over to our lecturers who are going to take us through the lecture tonight. Joe, Fung, and also Sarah, are you there?
Hello, everybody. Lovely to see you all. Well, to see your chats anyway. And a pleasure to be back this evening to talk to you all things movies.
Fantastic. I'm going to leave you there. Students, enjoy the lecture, the last one of the series, and teachers, take it away. See you at the end.
Thank you, Ben.
Bye.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Well, welcome to our conversation about cinema, and as was in the introduction, the connection between Asian cinema and Hollywood. My name is Jo. I'm the subject leader for Media and Communication Studies at Trinity College. A lot of my career has been teaching English, but I did study cinema studies at university. And at university, I used to review and films and theatre, and I was quite active with the student paper. Then I've lived and worked overseas. I've worked in Korea, Thailand, China, Sri Lanka, all over the place. And I'm very happy and excited to be teaching my first passion and love, which is cinema. So I'm excited to share that with you all today. I'll hand you over to Sarah now.
Thanks, Jo. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, and welcome, and thank you so much for coming tonight. Really appreciate your time. I've been at Trinity for 6 years now, but teaching for about 20 years. I used to teach, English and EAP and literature and things like that. But now I get to just teach media and comms, which I absolutely love. I think my favorite part is watching students really improve their photography skills and filming and like it all comes together, improving their creativity, really experimenting with those sorts of things in media and comms. Yeah, so thanks for coming and looking forward to chatting with you all tonight.
Awesome. And Fungni?
Hi everyone. I'm Fung Yi. I've taught at Trinity for roughly around the same time as Sarah, and compared to Joe and Sarah's experience in teaching, I'm quite an early career teacher. I've always had a strong love of film, especially having volunteered in various film festivals and events. Also, majoring in screenwriting in my bachelor's degree, and then going on to study education specifically, just so that I have another excuse to talk about my interest in media communications. So I hope tonight will be an interesting conversation between the three of us and that we all manage to get something out of it. Thank you.
Fantastic. So what I'll do now is I will share my screen, and we've got a few little slides. Just really the whole point of having these slides is not to deliver a lecture as such, but just to keep us three in particular on track, because as you can see, we love talking about film and we can talk for hours about film. So this will just keep us a little bit on track. We mentioned before that we were looking at Asian cinema and Hollywood, but actually because that's such a big topic, we thought we might be quite specific about it, focusing on Japanese cinema. And so in light of that, and in the light of the fact that yesterday was Halloween, happy Halloween, everybody. We had an awesome online Halloween party with our media and communication students last night. We've got a little question to ask you, and what we would like you to do is type your answers into the chat box, please. And that question to get the event rolling tonight is this: what Japanese horror movies have you seen? We're assuming that you've all watched some type of horror movie, and probably Japanese horror movies. So we're looking forward to seeing what comes up on the chat. I can see that there's the classic The Ring already. I think Fung, you've watched The Ring, haven't you?
Yes, I have. So yeah, I've watched many versions of The Ring and I've got a lot to say about it, but I think I would leave that a little bit for later.
Yeah, sure.
Until we dig in a little bit more.
Sadako is a common one. And Ju-on, I haven't heard of Ju-on.
Ju-on is actually The Grudge, and it's a Korean horror film.
Yeah, that's right, The Grudge. Yeah. I think, yes, The Grudge, The Ring, they're quite common. I have to confess here, as much as I love cinema, I'm not a big fan of horror. I sometimes struggle with why would someone voluntarily get scared? Sarah, what's your thoughts on horror movies?
I agree. I feel a bit sort of immature not being able to cope with horror films, but I still can't do it, even at my age.
I think that Sarah and I are with Florence. Florence says she's too scared to watch horror movies.
That's right.
Having said that, last night we did have an online Halloween party with our students, and we watched a horror movie together, and that was nice because there was a whole lot of people holding my hand, so to speak.
It feels a bit safer, doesn't it? Yeah. Joyce has mentioned Dead Note. I don't know that one. Fung, do you?
I think Joyce meant Death Note, which is based on a manga series. Yeah, that was later adapted into anime and then into a live action film. I would say that Death Note is a combination of genres, actually. I would say that it's a combination of crime, thriller, and horror.
May's pointed that out too.
Yeah. So why would you add crime into it? For what makes it? Because I know we've got horror and thriller coming through the chat, but not crime.
Because the Death Note, I can't remember his name, but Death Note is centered around a protagonist named Light. He comes across a book where if you write whoever you wish to obviously die, you write their name in the book, and it kind of gets fulfilled. And so he ends up being some kind of, I guess you could categorize him as a serial killer. And then, the police get involved in this, and they start trying to figure this out, who's causing all these mysterious killings.
Okay, so the problem solving is part of it as well, and intellectual
part of
horror, could we say? Awesome. People are still putting it. I knew that everyone would have lots of things to write. But we are going to move on. As much as we would love to be discussing horror and horror movies all night, we thought we might try and narrow it down, as I said before. And we thought that Godzilla might be a good starting point for the discussion tonight. And so I've got another question to our audience here. And this time it's about the movie Godzilla. First of all, have you seen any Godzilla movies? And if you could tell us if you've seen Japanese Godzillas or Hollywood Godzillas, or even the year, or both. Just curious to see what people's experiences are. Oh, yes. Lots of Hollywood Godzilla here. The latest one. May's saying she's seen the latest one. She thinks.
I've seen a lot of Hollywood ones.
Yeah. Has anyone seen Japanese? I missed if anyone had seen any Japanese.
Oh, Godzilla and Ultraman, yes.
Excellent. Hannah has.
Hannah has, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Oops, sorry, forget about that for the minute. So Godzilla movies, we might start off with what we thought we'd do is just talk about, what are the features of, I guess, the Godzilla franchise. Can I say that, Fung, that it's a franchise?
Yeah, it is a large franchise in Japan with an incredibly long history. I've actually got them here. I just grabbed them off my bookshelf. I've actually got quite a few, which is hard because I've got the green screen on. But yes, so Godzilla is a long-standing franchise way back from the mid-1950s in Japan by Toei Studios, and eventually its popularity gained recognition in Hollywood, which is why the more recent Hollywood adaptations with Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things fame is much more recognizable. But Godzilla itself has had a very incredibly long history in Japan before it even made its way over into mainstream Hollywood. Which is an interesting conversation.
Yeah, some of I guess for both of the Japanese and the Hollywood versions, I mean, underlying that Godzilla is, it does have that sort of environmental message, doesn't it, in all of them, about nuclear testing or the H-bomb or so on. And about how nature, when it's interfered with by us humans, can go perhaps horribly wrong sometimes.
Always horribly wrong.
Always. I was not going to go. Always horribly wrong. And I guess that's one of the reasons perhaps why Godzilla has lasted so long, because it has this fundamental message, which unfortunately perhaps is still speaking to us today.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah. So for the sort of the Japanese sort of cultural version of Godzilla, can we call it the original Godzilla, has sort of some standout features. Do you want to lead us in a discussion about that?
Where to begin? So much to say about it. I think my introduction to Godzilla was the original 1954 Godzilla. So it was a black and white movie where it was basically a B-grade monster flick with this evil monster or entity terrorizing, I guess, suburban Japan. And Godzilla, the entity that is Godzilla, was an entity that kind of represented this idea of pollution or the negative effect. Well, nuclear power is negative in as many ways as you look at it, and the effects that was having on society. And so, when eventually as the movies went by, it just became this cult horror classic of this monster terrorizing the town, and it became iconic in that sense.
Yeah. So Fung, you mentioned about the B grade horror flick. Sarah, do you want to talk to us about what that B grade? What are some features of that B grade sort of style movie that Fung was referring to? Because I think that they can become classics in themselves.
Oh, B grade, yeah. Well, I suppose it's kind of that real schlock kind of stuff, isn't it? That it's sort of the like the blood and the gore and the kind of things that the general mass market sort of audience would kind of go for, and not necessarily a strong storyline, and not necessarily kind of adhering to any kind of original film.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah.
And it had sort of a traditional sort of made at home low budget feel to it, I think. And some of those early Godzillas in particular, they have the Godzilla characters are kind of funny in a way now when we look at them.
That's because for some time, for those early decades of Godzilla over in Japan by Toho Studios, is because they had actors playing Godzilla, so they had to wear the Godzilla costume.
No CGI.
No CGI. Because the Japanese film industry compared to Hollywood at the time. I mean, Hollywood comes from a long history of pioneering a lot of what we know today in terms of camera editing and shooting techniques and a lot of technology, alongside France in particular over in Europe, and so. By the time it got adopted by Asian film industries, particularly Japan, the industry, although Japanese cinema has been around for maybe a little, not as long, but roughly the same time, obviously the industry was smaller. The value of films at the time wasn't as held as high regard. And so, the budget and productions were much smaller, longer hours, and there was more dependence on a lot of practical low budget effects.
It reminds me of I don't want to go back to horror movies, of course, but it just reminds me of a Netflix series at the moment called The Movies That Made Us. I don't know if anyone's seen it. You can type in the chat if you've seen it, but I think it's kind of fun. They're about half-hour episodes looking at, Halloween and Friday the 13th and how they were originally kind of that B-grade budget movie as well, in a way. It's lots of fun to watch, I think. Anyway, we could go on about B-grade movies, but we're here to discuss Japanese movies and features of Japanese movies and how Hollywood gets them. And what am I can I say the word destroys them?
Well, I was reading a bit about the American, version of Godzilla, and it was talking about American sanitization and kind of losing a lot of the original ideas, as you're saying, of the original Godzilla, and the suggestion, the visual metaphor that came in the original, like Godzilla having a grooved hide, which was suggestive of the survival of nuclear terror, whereas the American film, I think I'm right in saying, didn't really echo that in any way, and really just made it that B-grade kind of film.
He just looked like a lizard, really. I think the American
that's
one.
Right.
That would be specifically the 1998 one, which not as many people know about because although
it was so bad.
I mean, I remember seeing that way back when it originally released, and I was quite young then, but by then I would have seen dozens of the original Japanese Godzilla movies. But it was just completely different. So it was given the name Godzilla. It was given a similar treatment, but so much of what made Godzilla was changed and tweaked and made more palatable for the Western, if not American, audience. So it doesn't lose a lot of that cultural nuance a lot of that B-grade appeal that made people love it so much.
Go for.
Oh no, sorry. I've got a lot to say. Like I said, I'm a big Godzilla fan. But I would say that the more recent Hollywood Godzilla movies, such as again the ones with Bryan Cranston and Millie Bobby Brown. Those ones, there's still a very strong American presence in them, obviously, because it's set in America, starring big-name American actors. But you do get a bit of that monster feel in them. Yeah, you're right, Hannah. So Hannah here says the American Godzilla changes a lot of things from the original. And it does, and this is what happens to a lot of a lot of American remakes of Asian films, and particularly Japan. But that's funny. It's funny that we say that because, because Hollywood's presence in the film industry is quite global and quite big. America does have certain influences on, I guess in this case, Japan as well. So you kind of get a kind of like a hot potato situation where you're kind of handing it back and forth, and you're taking bits and pieces of the other, but then adding your own flair to it. And so it is quite easy for a lot of that nuance to get lost. And we're getting a lot of. Sorry,
No, as I say, I just love Josh's comment. Josh Lopez's comments. It's dear to my heart, I think. How many times does America have to save the world in a movie? And for me, this is almost like the fundamental difference between, let's say, that the Japanese storytelling of Godzilla and the American storytelling of Godzilla, because the Japanese one, it's very much about, these moral or ethical dilemmas that they have to face, and choices that they have to make when faced with this creature from the deep, let's say. But in the American ones, it's basically, there's this monster, quick, we've got to be heroes, we have to kill it, and find as many different ways as they can to kill it, without any of those dilemmas at all.
And it's that thing, and Himesh makes a good point. That Himesh says it's good, but it doesn't live up to its name or characteristics. And as Josh said, is very American centered, and that's very true in a lot of American films and properties. I think when we talk about Godzilla, for example, or it's same with what happened to The Ring and with Ju-on, which is actually Korean, is that America, as a big Western presence, it tends to exoticize other cultures. It will appeal they will appeal for what they need, what they think is appealing, and what will get people's attention. But then they will either rid of it completely in the remake or adaptation, to put it kindly, or they will domesticate it, so imbue a lot of American values, or just get rid of it and can make something completely different altogether. And
I think we could see that. I was looking at, I think it's the 1988 one, which was the one I was looking at recently. I can't remember the year now, but not the opening sequence, but very, very early on in the opening of it, they're in the boat on the water. And oh my God, I had to write it down because I thought this is exactly what we're talking about here. Just in case the American audience weren't sure which nationality the people were in the boat. They're eating noodles, they're watching sumo wrestling, there's these sharp knives going everywhere, and of course they're cutting up fish. So all of the stereotypes and cliches that you could think of in one sequence, it was like, that's exactly what, why it didn't work as a movie, I would argue.
No, it's a lot of what it made it didn't work. It's kind of like, it's just like almost like a passing comment. It's Godzilla, like, that Godzilla, and then kind of move on and then take it into a completely different direction. Like the director for the 1998 Godzilla, Roland Emmerich, he knew of Godzilla, but he wasn't actually interested in the story itself or the character itself, and he just kind of took it and ran with it the way he wanted to make it. And Americans, Hannah made another perceptive comment where they say American films sometimes focus on how America will look good to people outside their country, and it's this idea of always being America being the best, the American dream kind of thing, which is kind of an outdated view, but it's still very much true today. And I think this idea of extermination that you mentioned earlier, Joe, exterminating the monster, again, that's a very American sentiment, whereas in Japan, since we're talking about it, Japan, this idea of creatures, or this lends itself to Japanese horror as well, as a presence that kind of lingers on that you can never quite get rid of. You might seal it away, for example, or you might trap it somewhere, but you can never truly get rid of that kind of entity. And so there's that cultural specificity and difference that shows itself.
That's right. So again, as you can see, that we could talk for hours, or particularly Fung Ni could talk for hours around Godzilla. I'm sure that you don't want to sit here for hours listening us talk about Godzilla. So I'm hoping that we kind of covered most of these points in that little discussion. I can see some really awesome stuff coming up in the chats. And I think maybe one thing that we didn't actually say is that white savior narrative, which is very much, I think, what everyone was referring to in that idea of the American hero, the outside influence coming in, but the outside influence is something that we need to destroy because we need to dominate. And as Chu has said, to save the world. So yeah, it's just I just thought we might put some of the phrases that we've sort of been covering in this first half of our discussion here. And you know, just to reinforce them for you, maybe you haven't seen these. Obviously everyone knows what we're talking about because of the chat, but maybe you're not so familiar with the English words for these expressions as well. And so yeah, it's Godzilla. But I think we need to move on because we've already been talking for half an hour. Can you believe it? It's like, what? Yes, oh my God, I'd love to talk about superheroes as well. I don't know if you, or not that Star Wars is a superhero, but you might notice that much to my daughter's embarrassment, I am wearing my Star Wars t-shirt today. Just to help us sort of have a bit of a chat about Star Wars and Akira Kurosawa. So we can't talk about Japanese cinema without talking about the master, can we? And of course, Akira Kurosawa, he's got his whole legacy and his whole oeuvre of work. But then, of course, there's this wonderful, perhaps, but definitely intense relationship with Hollywood. So I do have another question. Well, we have another question for the audience before we start talking. Is anyone aware of or can share with us information about the connection between Akira Kurosawa and Star Wars? Put in the chat, please, if anyone has heard of the connection at all, because there is a very strong connection, isn't there, Fung, between Akira Kurosawa and Star Wars? Everyone's adjusting from our... Yeah, I love it, Max. Full sword face. So maybe while the comments are coming through, Fung, do you want to talk about those sword fights and that should have maybe some of the film techniques that are used and so on?
So Star Wars, the director of the original trilogy, so episodes 4, 5, and 6 of Star Wars, George Lucas, he was heavily influenced by Akira Kurosawa's work, particularly, as Josh pointed out, Hidden Fortress, Seven Samurai, Rashomon, and even bits of Yojimbo as well. And so I think the most obvious example of it, or maybe you're not to notice, is that the use of Akira Kurosawa's iconic wipes that he does in a lot of his films. You see that in Star Wars quite a bit as well.
So when we're talking about wipes, we're talking about the editing techniques, the editing and the transitions. Yeah.
And the editing transitions. So you do get a lot of that. I think you could easily find examples of that on YouTube, if I'm speaking honestly. And the philosophy or the beliefs and values around the way that, for example, the Jedi versus the Sith or the Empire even is very similar to, this idea of the hierarchy in Japanese society of samurais, shoguns, samurai and lords, code kind of thing, and ways of being, and what the sort of sword fights, how that comes into it, and how there's a certain unspoken set of rules that goes around it, and this way of living. So that's even down to the costuming as well. I think there's very obvious influences there as well. So obviously it's something that's George Lucas has taken inspiration from and has managed to turn into this 9-movie plus franchise with all these spin-off series, and it's become a very big presence in the world, and it kind of feeds itself back into Asian societies or cultural
Yeah,
references, and you do see that a lot.
Yeah, and I think there's that idea of the little guys, isn't there? The idea that
The
the
underdog,
little guy, the underdog. Thank you. The underdog becomes the hero, I guess, in a way, is a theme that's common in both of the sort of filmmaking styles. So Akira Kurosawa then sort of tried to have a little foray into Hollywood itself, I believe. And I'm going to refer to Fung again here because this is her area of passion. Tell us what happened, Fung.
Well, obviously with those big name movies, which I've also got lying around on the shelf behind, which you can't see because I've got the zoom back to this now.
By the way, you should see Fung's shelf behind her. It's awesome.
So yes, what was I saying? So Jo, could you ask the question again? I kind of blanked out there.
Sorry, I distracted you. So
yes.
Akira Kurosawa tried to,
did
he try to go to Hollywood, or did Hollywood try to take him?
He did, but he wasn't successful. So, I think around the 1950s and 60s where a lot of those his iconic movies came out, and one of those big ones that we kind of know better came out. He quickly gained wide recognition globally, not just in the US, but also in Europe as well. So, many filmmakers that we know of, some of who are still living today, like Werner Herzog, known from more documentaries, like Quentin Tarantino was heavily influenced by him, even Federico Fellini as well as a whole slew of other directors that have been heavily influenced by Kurosawa. And it's because Kurosawa himself and his films was in turn influenced by Hollywood, and he over those decades, so during the 50s, well into the 80s even, where he started to quickly lose his appeal as time went on. He was criticized by the Japanese film industry and Japanese society for being quite westernized in his films. His filmmaking is quite westernized because he had a lot of Western influence in his film.
Yeah.
So opposite way.
So did they feel that the purity had gone, perhaps? Can we say that? Or not
well,
really?
it's just I think new gets old quick would be the thing. And so so
because
why
I know that we're not talking about Australian cinema here, but that often happens in Australia, that filmmakers either we lose them, they go to America to make their movies, or they try to make an American style movie and really loses the flavor, the sort of the cultural codes, or I don't know what the word is really, but the flavor is all of local cinema, and then people go off them in a way.
So because Kurosawa in a lot of ways was in turn influenced by a lot of Western films, so Europe and the US, it's, I guess, in turn, in a way, it makes it why his films are so appealing to the West itself, and that people in the West found it much easier to kind of adapt or take inspiration from or remake in their own way. Another one being, here's The Seven Samurai and how that's been remade to The Magnificent Seven, which also been remade a couple of times in the US, kind of thing, and it kind of carries on.
Yeah. And again, I'm just getting distracted by comments.
I know I am getting distracted by the comments too.
I know Josh has made this great point, and any reference to Martin Scorsese, I have to latch onto, because one of my heroes, I must say. Martin Scorsese, of course, dissed the MCU big time in his comments, saying it was just mindless, and it was just mindless entertainment. And then I think it caused quite a furore on social media. What do you think, Sarah? Do you think that these sort of superhero / Marvel franchise movies are just pure entertainment, maybe just about making money, or
yeah,
is there anything
I'm definitely the wrong person to ask. I'm not a fan. I'm just not, and I can't bring myself to. I get lost in those films as well. I lose track of the plot, and I just don't care enough about the characters in the end. But I know many people do. I know my nephews who are sort of early 20s and teens that really love them and are really passionate. So I get there must be something in them perhaps I miss. But yeah, Josh, in terms of new Hollywood cinema and directors like Scorsese, they're hard to beat because they're edgy, they're interesting, they've got some new things coming through compared to like the past from classical Hollywood. And to me, like, yeah, blockbuster period kind of brings back some of those a bit more dull storylines, I think. But I'm sure others will disagree a lot with me.
Well, I'll jump in here because I'm a bit of a mixture, because I love Martin Scorsese and I love all that, let's say, auteur style cinema. But I also do love Marvel movies as well, and I mean, I'm wearing a Star Wars t-shirt, so I'm a bit of a sucker for a franchise as well. And I like all the spin-offs and and so on. But what I was actually going to say was, and this, we often talk about this in our blockbuster lectures, because in our course we cover film movements, of course, and a lot of not a lot, but some of those blockbuster directors now are making a bit more unique, a bit more making movies which are telling their own stories a little bit more. It's almost like they're using the platform that Blockbuster has given them, whether that's financial or reputation, and allowing them then to tell their own stories in their own way. Fung, what do you think about that?
Oh, there's so many to pick from. We could be forever. I think I'll just grab on a few points, the few more recent points that you made. I think in terms of the Scorsese point, I do see where Martin Scorsese is coming from, because directors like new Hollywood directors or directors of his ilk, which is inclusive of Steven Spielberg, who's still working today. Brian De Palma, who came to rise especially during the late 1980s through 1970s, and then a slew of others. They came from a period where the values around filmmaking were still very much focused on the storytelling and the craft of filmmaking, and it's quite highly romanticized, and it was less about the profits that were being made. It was on the value in the craft of filmmaking, how to tell a story, how to create story worlds, and how to build characters and things like that, which I guess in a way does share similarities with Marvel or DC films. I mean, these were, like the student said, these are based on comics, which was where the value of storytelling and developing story worlds and characters were. But once you bring that over to and produce that into a blockbuster film, a lot of that gets taken away, and it does become a big money-making machine, because if it's based on a well-loved comics property, then there's already existing long history and existing fan base, so that you don't have to do as much work, and it's more about making money and ensuring that money flow continues in. So I can see where the criticisms from Martin Scorsese would come through.
And I think a lot of the filmmaking techniques, which as film fans we love to see, that awesome editing, and the disjointed narrative, and so it gets a bit lazy with the blockbusters.
It does. And it does get rushed as well, because I'm a big comics book fan, and I read a lot of these, and so when you see that get condensed into Avengers Endgame, a lot of again nuance in the storytelling gets a lot of that gets cut out, and a lot of that development you don't really see unless you've read the comics themselves. Then you can make those connections yourself, but otherwise, if you're seeing that Marvel movie for the first time, you wouldn't understand a lot of that.
So speaking about nuances, maybe that's a nice little segue into our last little bit of conversation. I hope we're allowed to talk a little bit longer. And this is the movie The Farewell. So I'm just typing in the chat here. Has anyone seen it and thoughts? Because we've all seen it and we've got different thoughts on it.
We do.
And we thought it would be interesting to just share with you all our chats on our ideas about this movie. So The Farewell, maybe I'll start off and we'll see what the comes up in the chats. You might recognize it, some of the actors, or really, is it kind of off the back of, I don't know if that's fair to say that, Crazy Rich Asians, but it's a movie that I watched recently about the main character, Chinese American girl, who goes back to China because her grandmother is very unwell. And so I think the whole sort of idea is that moving from one culture to another culture, maybe being displaced, trying to connect with the culture, or I don't know, so on and so forth. But I must say I really enjoyed it. But of course, Fung has a very different view.
I guess before I do, Joe, I would like to hear more about what kind of captured you with that film.
Yeah.
And Sarah as well.
Yeah, well, the biggest thing that caught me about this movie, The Farewell, was when the main character, and sorry, I can't remember what the character's name is in the movie right now, but when she moves, when she flies over to China, and even right when she's in the cab, I think, leaving the airport, the images of the city, the buildings, and for me, I just love the scenes where they go into hotels. They go into hotels, and there's a particular sort of almost a Wes Anderson-ish feel to the way the hotel staff are working and framed, and what she sees. It's almost like the camera is through her eyes. It just made me feel like the times I've been to China 4 times now, and I lived and worked in China, and every time it was just like, yeah, this is how I saw it. This is what struck me. This is really spoke to me as a foreigner going to that culture, and the connections that she made. That was probably the strongest thing. I really got that idea of a foreigner going into an environment that should be familiar but isn't.
I think, it's because, although Awkwafina, or I can't remember her name, that's her Chinese name. Awkwafina's character is kind of embodies this character of being caught between worlds. So she's not, what you would typically look at and call a white American. And she's not entirely, she may be ethnically Chinese, but she's not culturally Chinese as well. And so, being the idea of being caught between two worlds, or a foreigner, as you put it, Joe. And I think, so she, going through the film, being supposedly supposed to be her home, but feeling like an outsider, I think for a lot of non-Asian or non-Chinese audiences, that makes it more palatable and more identifiable and more relatable, because the focus is more on that human emotion of being, feeling outside of something rather than being a part of and trying to fit in. But for me, I don't know, when this movie came out, there was a huge celebration in I guess, American Asian, or American Asian, or Asian Australian pockets of the community. And I went to see the film interested to see what the chatter was all about, and it just didn't really resonate with me as much, because even within that cultural identity of being in between cultures, there's a wide range of experiences within that. I mean, compared that, a few students wanted me to speak on Vietnamese cinema. I think I agree with one of the comments that I saw, was that I haven't seen a lot of Vietnamese films. I only recently, in the past few years, got really into Vietnamese variety shows, because my mom watches a lot of that. And then just seeing the stark differences between the influences over there. There's a strong Korean influence in a lot of Vietnamese variety shows now. And so there's a bit of Western influence in that as well. So I think it's really interesting when I compare it to, Korean variety shows, or similar shows over here in Australia, the obvious influences and differences. Or, to speak specifically about Vietnamese cinema, like I think a few students have mentioned Bo Ya. So, or the English title would be Goodbye Father. No, not Goodbye Father. Father, I'm sorry. and the recent but sort of quiet recognition of a queer movie called Songlang. I can't remember what the correct pronunciation is, and little titles like that sort of making its way through. I still feel like the Vietnamese film industry has a long way to go because we've kind of stolen ideas or had like a weak film industry for the longest time, but that's kind of hard when you don't have the money to grow it, I would say. So you don't get a lot of stories being told, and so you often have Vietnamese filmmakers who grew up in the West coming back and making movies there, but then there's a disconnect between cultures there.
We haven't really had a Vietnamese American, let's say, like we've got here with Awakafina making, or Chloe Zhao, for example. Although she's not really American Chinese, is she? She's really Chinese, I think. Phil, are there any sort of strong Vietnamese filmmakers working in the West? I'm not really sure.
Not big name Vietnamese directors, I would say. I mean, there's I can't remember his name, but the director of Norwegian Wood, for example, based on a Japanese novel, actually, by Haruki Murakami, for example. So Norwegian Wood, he spent most of his time in France and the French film industry, actually. So he's well known over there. But a lot of Vietnamese filmmakers that I know of personally, who grew up and were raised in the West, still very much on the local or small scale film festival circuit rather than the big names. So I've yet to see a huge presence in Hollywood from a Vietnamese filmmaker, even though we are around.
Because I've seen a few, when you mentioned France, it made me remember I've seen a few, particularly animations made by French Vietnamese filmmakers. They've been quite emotional, really, quite strong, but interesting. Sarah, have you watched The Farewell? Or have you got thoughts on The Farewell? Or
Yes. I just loved. I totally get what you're saying, Fung, and I can see there's all those sort of issues in the film. Just as a standalone piece, I guess the acting, the relationship between, is it Billy? Is that right, the main character?
Finally, someone remembers her name.
I can't remember her.
And some of those scenes, just to me, seemed really natural, and having a mama who's a bit older and stuff. I don't know, I just really related to the acting in it, so I liked it as a standalone film. But I can see there's many issues around it.
There's some beautiful. I thought there was some beautiful scenes when she was crying, or when she was feeling like in the room on her own and she was isolated. And, it touched me. And we really wanted to talk about it because I remember I came into work, or not into work, but came online perhaps to work. I was going, oh my God, I've seen The Farewell. It was awesome. I loved it. And Fung went, what? You see?
No. What's wrong with you?
Joe, we need to talk, she said.
Yeah, she would have said.
I think the Farewell, I mean, it's kind of idea where Asian cinema aside, Asian representation in Western media is so exoticized or othered or far and few in between that every time there is some semblance of it, or there's some crumb of it that people just take in, kind of like, oh great, this is Asian representation. But I do think that true Asian representation in Western's film and television still has a long way to go. Not every Asian representation in Western media is going to be perfect or is going to be liked. And I think it's I celebrate them in the sense that they're there, but I still think that there's a long way to go. And how and the control that Asian filmmakers get in how they tell their own stories is just as important. But it's, again, Hollywood itself is still riddled with a lot of problems. So we from behind the scenes, there's a lot of Vietnamese presence behind the scenes. So in sort of producing or sort of crew work and things like that, in editing and whatnot, but not so much in front of the camera, which again still has a long way to go.
And that idea of representation, to be honest, that's fundamentally what this whole hour has been about, really, isn't it? And it's a really heavy, strong, important topic about representation, and studying media and communications, we have to talk about representation because it's all about telling stories. It's all about whose voices are being heard and whose stories are being told. And we're looking at cinema here because, well, it's heaps of fun. And we say to our students, you can go and tell your parents that your homework this week is watch a movie. But it's in everything. It's in, we study journalism, we study branding and marketing and new types of media, and this idea of representation just covers everything. And I can see in the comment, even just the comments here about the Japanese culture and identifying with Vietnamese culture or identifying with Chinese culture, or which culture are we identifying with. I think it's a really, really interesting topic. We make it light because we're talking about movies, but it is a really heavy series and important topic. And I know Sarah feels very passionate about representation. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, absolutely, I do. I think it's so important, and more so it feels like. I was going to say too, I think one of the good things about film is that it's very open to interpretation, and people have their own opinions, and as you can see tonight, even we disagree on certain things. And I think film reviews are fantastic to read, aren't they? Because it's kind of a checks and balance of the film industry. So like when the American Godzilla came out, it got really bad, many bad reviews anyway. And I think that allows then people to be honest about what they're feeling and point out the faults of the problems with these films.
Yeah. And these, everyone's got a phone, everyone's got a camera, anyone can make a movie these days. And so, that's one of the exciting things about the world now with new media and digital stuff, that we all have this opportunity to tell our stories.
It is. But I think it's one thing to have, it does sound it is hopeful to know that we do have, with our smartphone that there is an opportunity to create these stories, but understanding how to tell the story is a different matter altogether. You could easily take a few shots and put it together, but how you choose to tell the story and really thinking and how that message is received is communicated with why you should study media.
Exactly.
Because it gives you a space to talk about these things. Yes, storytelling is incredibly important, Joe. I do agree. And this idea that I remember talking to a friend of mine a couple months ago about. I can't remember what I was. I was quite rather angry and upset about. I'm like, I think it was over. I can't remember what it was, but I was just saying that I would love. I think I was angry about a representation of a specific Asian character in a American film. I can't remember what it was, but I was saying that I would love just to see a science fiction movie set in space where one of the main characters was, a Vietnamese woman, for example, but her entire personality wasn't based around the fact that she eats rice for lunch.
And noodles for breakfast.
And she has certain cultural practices that she practices, like giving thanks to ancestors, like that doesn't define her entire being. You can eat, you can do so many of other things and still be Asian. It doesn't change no matter whether you are deeply culturally connected to that or not. It doesn't change the fact at all. So I think it is still a tricky line to kind of stand on and sort of travel on. But like I said, we're starting to see changes in the industry now. But hopefully the pace will pick up and we'll see a lot more of it within the next decade.
So be like Hannah, write stories, tell your stories in any way you can. And obviously studying media and communication studies, we're all for a good story. Whether that's a news story, a citizen journalism story, a marketing story, an advertising story, or a filmmaking story, an animated story. Life would be terrible if we weren't telling stories, I think. And I think that sort of wraps up everything that we were planning.
There's so much more to talk about.
I know. Well, thank you everyone for listening or indulging in our conversation. And I've got a great list of horror movies. I remember at the start of this session, we asked everyone about horror movies, and I know everyone wanted to talk about horror movies for the whole hour. But there's a good list of recommendations there, I think, and that's one of the bonuses that we get, don't we, from teaching this subject. We get lots of information from students. So thank you very much. And Sarah and Fung, thank you very much as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Joe, Fung, and Sarah. If I could get you just to stop sharing your screen there, and
Oh,
we'll
yes,
come back
of
on.
course. Sorry. How do I stop?
Here we go.
Stop share. There's a button that says.
There we go. Students, what an amazing discussion and reflection about Asian cinema. I'd like to open it now. There's been some fantastic comments. James has been working in the background non-stop with students asking questions about how do I apply to Trinity College? When are the next intakes? You know, when I study. James, any standout questions that you'd like to, or you think might be helpful for everyone to know about?
We've received a lot of stuff. I've had a lot of inquiries about the certificate, so that you don't all have to individually ask me on the Q&A thing. The certificates will go out within the next couple of weeks. They are confirming that you have attended all 7 of the sessions in this series. So if you've attended all 7 of the sessions and you use the same username and email address as your login credentials when you registered, then you will come up on our list. It's automatically generated. We don't check individually. And so you will receive your certificate. If you've only attended 3 or 4, then unfortunately you won't be receiving a certificate, because the certificate just confirms that this student has attended all 7 sessions. Apart from that, we've had lots of questions in the background about when can I arrive in Australia. Well, we're very hopeful that will happen in the first half of next year. Students are going to start arriving in Australia, particularly in Melbourne and Sydney international airports, from the end of this month, but in very, very small numbers. Just students that are returning to take up the degrees, the bachelor degrees and the vet courses that they have already started. So for new students, we're expecting them into Australia in the first half of next year. The other question we've received a lot of inquiries about is there any limit on the number at this stage? And for all of the time that Ben and I have worked at Trinity, we've not had any limits on students joining our program. So there should be no problem if you meet both our English language requirement and our academic requirement. You'll be given an offer, and then it's a question for you as to whether you come in, but we have no limits yet.
And we've got applications coming in already from students from Indonesia, the Philippines, from Thailand, Singapore, Myanmar, Vietnam, of course. And we've got students from over 30 different countries at the moment studying, who are waiting to come back from as far away as Africa, Bulgaria, Russia, the South America, and of course, in our own backyard here in Asia. And so if you are interested, get those applications and inquiries in. James will put the contact details into the chat. Questions, Q&A. This is the part of the lectures that you guys love the most. And I can see some names. There's familiar names already putting their hands up who'd like to ask questions every week. Let's kick it off with someone who we've got to know over the 7 weeks, James, and we'll miss him. And that's Tu. I'm going to open your microphone, Tu.
Thank you, Tu, because you have been very diligent. You've attended so many of these sessions and you always ask good questions. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. 7 days straight of being selected to ask question. I'm very honorable and thanks from everyone for listening to my question. Today I came up with a question which I have been wondering since I was a child. Why does the actor and the athlete become famous, but inventors and different scientists were absent and show them at death?
Who would like to that one?
I-
Actors and actresses, they're the ones who get famous and make all the money, but scientists, Fung, are you going to have a go at that?
Yeah, I'll have a go at that. I'll just give a very general answer. I would say that's because you know, when we think about what makes actors and actresses appealing is their ability to be relatable to the other person. That's their job. The whole point, you know, the actors or actresses' job is to portray various versions of ourselves, whether they're portraying a person who runs a bakery or whether they're portraying you know, a sports athlete with an injury who goes through a struggle. They're there as vehicles to tell stories which are relatable to us, and they're representations of our reality. And so, you know, it helps if they're good looking or, you know, visually attractive in a way, because unfortunately a lot of people like pretty things. Whereas, you know, scientists and inventors and of the like, yeah, that's right. It's a form of escapism, Drew, and it doesn't require as much thinking as trying to understand a scientist who's, for example, scientists or inventors whose whole life purpose is to, you know, dive deep into research and discovery, and they don't think so much about relatability to other people, but rather giving ways for people to live, I suppose, or ways of doing things. So there's just a different way of interaction, which is not as appealing, I suppose, would be the simple answer.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And To, thank you very much for your question. You've contributed really well over the last 7 weeks, and we love your questions. Let's go to also a student who's been with us many weeks now, and we love her comments. Hannah Michelle Deondon, I'm going to open your microphone. Hannah, go ahead.
Good evening. Am I heard?
Yes, we can hear you.
I got
Yes.
I got a question regarding cinema. What are the factors and the qualifications are there to consider a movie or a blockbuster to be part of that cinema?
So did anyone else want to have a go? Because I could answer that. No? You're okay. Yeah, okay. I'll take one for the team. Cinema, the basic definition of cinema is the art or the motion picture or the art of making film. So that's when earlier when I was talking about Scorsese versus the Russo brothers who did Avengers Endgame, how their views towards filmmaking and the art of filmmaking is vastly different. Blockbusters was a term way back in World War II, I think it was, Joe, to refer to aerial bombs the impact of these bombs would be to destroy entire blocks. But obviously when we talk about blockbusters in terms of films, it's the impact they make on the box office or the amount of money that they manage to make. And so you can see there that blockbusters, and more recently so, I mean, I could give a whole lecture on this, which I do, to the Trinity students, but the difference is the value over filmmaking and the way they see filmmaking. You know, if filmmaking as an art or filmmaking as a way of ensuring audience numbers and ensuring profit, money, and merchandise, there's different importance placed on the two. So can blockbusters be qualified as cinema? Many of them are. Not so much more recent ones like Marvel movies, for example, but if you look in the early history of blockbusters, when we talk about, you know, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, or Star Wars, or, you know, for more relatable ones, or Blade Runner, a lot of those are considered cinema as well as blockbusters. So it just really depends on where the value is placed of the film, to put it simply.
Thank you very much for that, Fung. And Hannah, great to have you back. And thank you very much for a fantastic question there. I'm just going to ask a question myself. Now, Trinity College Foundation Studies can be quite a challenging program. It's transformative and it's preparing students for entry to Melbourne University. If a student chooses media and communication, what can they expect, and is it fun?
Well, I might. Can I answer this one? Being the subject leader, maybe I should start the conversation here. And first of all, of course it's fun. Of course it's fun. Everything has to be fun. We have to be engaged with it and enjoy doing it, or else we will find it, we will struggle to get the results that we want. So it's fun, but it's more than just fun. And this is what I really love to tell to the students, that yeah, we watch movies, yeah, we talk about movies, yeah, we design logos and so on. But it's a really serious subject, and it's these days particularly in any field of work, any field of business, whether it's being a lawyer or a surgeon or an accountant, media, you come in touch with media, you know, public relations, it just covers so many fields. And you may not necessarily want to study art as such, but even if you're going down commerce and studying business, knowing about media literacy and how the media works is super, super important. So in our course, which goes for the whole year, we cover all of that. We start off with cinema history, and we look at particularly the art of storytelling, which is what today has been all about. And we get students to make movie posters and I come up, make movie trailers and do some little stop motions. And we have photography competitions and so on. But what we're doing is trying to activate that idea of being aware of how stories are told and being aware of how viewpoints and perspectives can be manipulated so that we can have more control over that. And in the second semester, we move into the communication side of it more. So marketing, advertising, journalism, where we have our own newspaper, which all our students write for. They transform that into a podcast, which we go to, well, pre-COVID, we would go to a recording studio, but we do it all online these days. And we just finished last week our annual media festival, which showcases all the students' work, and students get involved designing pamphlets and brochures. So yeah, heaps of fun, but fundamentally really, really important stuff, Ben.
Well, sounds fantastic, and it really does sound quite hands-on as well, really diving into it. We've got, we had a student by the name of Dang. Are you there? You had your hand up, but have put it down. We've got Tu who wants to ask one more question. Tu, make it a quick one. We've got a few more students to go through. Tu,
Yeah,
what's your question?
So it's a quick one. In pop culture, do we remember the best artworks that create a sense of unanimity or those that a click debate?
Right. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Sarah.
I just want to say that's a really great question. It's one of the best questions I think I've heard. It's a really interesting one. I think it depends on the time, because I think back in the war, like Joe was alluding to before, it was about escapism sometimes. You know, so it was those classical Hollywood films, in Hollywood anyway, which really allowed you just to enjoy, and musicals and things like that, which were just fun really to watch, didn't make you think too much. So that was that first point you make about sense of being unanimous, bringing societies together, being more cohesive. And then in some ways, I think society then they did look to Europe and looked at those films which were eliciting more debate in the new wave movements in Europe, like French New Wave and neorealism, things like that. So I think it depends on the time and what's happening in society. So, you know, it's that idea of art reflecting society or vice versa, I guess. But yeah, fantastic question.
Excellent. We're going to take one more question here, and then I think we might wrap things up. We've got Dan Vol. Tan, I'm going to open your microphone here. Go ahead. Dan Vol. Tan.
Can you guys hear me now? I'm
really
sorry.
We can.
Yeah.
Right. Would you, how should I say this? Are you expecting a future, like a kind of a superhero movie, but with more representatives of the minorities, like Asians or Mexicans or anything? What are your expectations for upcoming industries on representation, the other nationalities?
Can I go? Well, yeah. I think if you look film and television aside, if you look in the comic book industry, you do I would say in the recent maybe 20 years or maybe a little longer, there have been bits and pieces of that. I remember how much of an impact just having Ling Up Tan over Veronica Ngo, for example, in Veronica Ngo, who's a big name in Vietnam, when she appeared in Star Wars, one of the recent Star Wars films, and Kelly Marie Tran as well, how that had a huge impact on me simply just for being there, because it was one of the very first and one of the very few times that you would see someone like me appear in something that you would not otherwise see them in. So I do think that there's promise for that, because if you do look in more independent areas of comic books, then you do the stories are there. It's just whether they will eventually be given the opportunity to show themselves on screen is another thing. So I am resilient about that, and I am hopeful about that. But at the same time, it's not to say, but that's simply in Western media. That's not to say that superheroes, as to put it generally speaking, did not exist prior. If you look in Asian media, such as Korean dramas, as one of the students mentioned, or Japanese anime, the idea of heroes and villains have been around for decades. Look in anime, which has a rich cultural history, which made its way over to the US in the 1970s and has very much kind of just entered the mainstream so much in the past few years. Superheroes and villains have been in anime for a very long time. Recently you got Jujutsu Kaisen, or you look at Demon Slayer, which has a huge global presence, or Dragon Ball, or One Piece even, or many others. I mean, I could go into it, but the difference with Japanese animation, for example, is that they dare to delve into areas of stories or storytellings that the US wouldn't, because of the conservative nature of the right-wing US sentiment. So you don't see a lot of that. But if you dive deep into Korean dramas and Japanese anime, you will definitely get a lot of those stories. So they do exist, just to certain aspects or certain parts of the world, I suppose, to put it shortly. Yeah.
Excellent. And that sounds so interesting. And
it is.
Go on and on and on, and
exactly.
and explore that. Before we wrap up tonight, this is the last in the series. And it seems quite sad that we're saying goodbye to so many students who have joined us for the last 7 weeks. What I would love to know from students with us, firstly, have you enjoyed the series? Put it into the chat. I'd love to hear your comments. Have you enjoyed the series? Also, what would you like to hear if we had another series in early 2022? What would you like? What do you want more of? What areas do you want to explore? We've had sciences, we've had history of ideas, we've had business, accounting, and economics. What do you want to hear? What areas? More history, more media and communication. More exploration of the areas that we chatted to tonight. We're getting some great comments here. We're going to collect your chats, guys, and we're going to sit down with them, and we're going to think about what we can do for next year. James, are you there? You want to join us in the farewell?
Yes, I'm still here. I'm still answering questions. There's so much activity in the background. But that was a great session. I was staring squarely at the Q&A box and answering furiously, but of course I could hear you presenting the material in my ears. It was wonderful. Thank you very much to our academics, and thanks to the students too for all their interaction. Wonderful session.
Excellent. So, brings us to the end of the series. Students, thank you very much for jumping on, joining us for 1, 2, or maybe all of the sessions. It's great to have such wonderful students who are hungry for information, who are eager to learn. And these are the types of students who do very, very well at Trinity College. If you do have questions about Trinity College, if you would like to set up a one-to-one Zoom session to talk about your study plan, your options, please get in contact with us on the email address that my colleague is posting into the chat now. We can set up a chat, we can set up a Zoom and chat to you about what your options might be. We would love to hear from you. Lecturers, teachers from Trinity College, thank you very much for participating in the last, and I think it's a really fun way to round off the series. And students, stay safe. We'll see you in 2022, and we hope that that might be here on the campus of the University of Melbourne and Trinity College. Bye for now.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you,
Joe,
everyone.
Fungni,
Thank you for attending. Thank
Ben,
you all.
thank you. See you all in 2022.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for attending.